The dust cloud rose behind her wagon like a ghost chasing her across the plains, and Nathan Ashford watched it approach his ranch with a strange mixture of dread and hope that he could not quite explain. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since his brother had died from fever, and the silence of the Montana Territory had become both his sanctuary and his prison. The woman driving that wagon was the first visitor he had seen in 2 months, and something about the way she sat so straight-backed on that bench told him she was bringing news that would change everything. He set down the fence post he had been hammering into the hard earth and wiped the sweat from his brow with his sleeve. The September sun beat down mercilessly, even though autumn was supposed to be arriving any day now. His cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, oblivious to the approaching visitor. Nathan was 30 years old, tall and lean from hard work, with dark hair that fell into his eyes when he forgot to cut it. His hands were calloused and scarred from years of ranch work, and his face had been weathered by sun and wind until he looked older than his years. The wagon came to a stop about 20 feet from where he stood. The woman who climbed down was younger than he had expected, perhaps 23 or 24, with auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet. She wore a dark blue traveling dress that was dusty from the road, and her green eyes met his with a directness that surprised him. Most women in Gold Hill avoided looking at him too closely, as if loneliness might be contagious. "Are you Nathan Ashford?" she asked, her voice clear and steady despite the long journey she must have endured. "I am," he said, walking closer but keeping a respectful distance. "Can I help you, miss?" "My name is Theresa Daniels," she said, and he saw her hands clench briefly at her sides before she continued. "I came from Gold Hill to bring you news about your cousin, Margaret." Nathan felt his stomach drop. Margaret was the only family he had left in the world, the only person who still wrote to him occasionally from her home in Virginia. "Is she all right?" Theresa's expression softened with sympathy. "I am afraid she passed away last month. She contracted pneumonia and did not recover. I was her neighbor and friend. She asked me before she died to travel here and tell you personally. She said a letter would not be enough." The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath Nathan's feet. He reached out to steady himself against the fence post. Margaret had been more like a sister to him than a cousin. When everyone else had written him off as a failure after his ranch had struggled those first few years, she had sent him encouraging letters and even a little money when she could spare it. And now she was gone. "I should have visited her," he said quietly. "I kept meaning to save enough money for the trip, but there was always another expense, always another reason to wait." "She understood," Theresa said gently. "She spoke of you often and with great affection. She was proud of what you had built here." Nathan looked at this stranger who had traveled all the way from Virginia to Montana just to deliver sad news to a man she had never met. It was an extraordinary kindness, one he did not quite know how to repay. "That was a long journey for you to make. I am grateful you came all this way." "Margaret was dear to me," Theresa said. "She took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Delivering this message was the least I could do to honor her memory." "You should rest," Nathan said, suddenly aware of his manners. "The journey from Gold Hill alone is 4 hours, and you must have been traveling for weeks before that. Come inside. I will make some coffee." Theresa hesitated, glancing back at her wagon. "I should not impose. I plan to stay in Gold Hill tonight and begin the journey back east tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Nathan felt an unexpected surge of something like panic. This woman had brought news that shattered his heart, but she had also brought a piece of Margaret with her, some final connection to the cousin he had loved. The thought of her disappearing as quickly as she had arrived left him feeling hollow. You cannot travel all that way back without resting properly first, At least stay for a meal and some water." He saw her wavering exhaustion evident in the lines around her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Just for a little while. Nathan's cabin was small but well-maintained, with one main room that served as kitchen and living area and a bedroom in the back. He had built it himself, along with his brother, when they had first claimed this land. Every board and nail held memories, both good and painful. He busied himself starting a fire in the stove and putting coffee on to boil, grateful for something to do with his hands. Theresa stood near the door, looking around the room with interest. "You have made a good home here." "It suits me well enough," Nathan said, "though it gets quiet in the winter months. Margaret said you raised cattle. About 200 head right now. I hope to expand next spring if the market prices hold steady." He poured water into the coffee pot and glanced at her. "What will you do now that Margaret is gone? Do you have family waiting for you back east?" Theresa's expression closed off slightly. "No, no family." There was a story there Nathan could tell, but he did not press. Everyone who came west had their reasons, and most of those reasons involved pain of one kind or another. He had learned not to ask too many questions. They sat at his small wooden table with their coffee, and Theresa told him more about Margaret's final days. She had been comfortable, surrounded by friends, and had passed peacefully in her sleep. Hearing these details brought Nathan both comfort and fresh grief. He found himself telling Theresa about growing up with Margaret, about summers spent at her family's farm, about how she had taught him to read when he was 6 years old and struggling in school. "She never mentioned you," Nathan said after a while. "In her letters, I mean. She wrote about her neighbors and her garden, but she never spoke of a Theresa Daniels." A faint flush colored Theresa's cheeks. "I only moved into the house next to hers about 8 months ago. We became close quickly, but there may not have been much time for her to write about me." "Where did you come from before that?" "Pennsylvania," Theresa said, staring into her coffee cup. "I was married briefly. When my husband died, I decided to start fresh somewhere new. I am sorry for your loss. Do not be," she said quietly. "It was not a happy marriage. His death freed me, though I know that is a terrible thing to say." Nathan was surprised by her honesty. Most people wrap their pain in polite fictions, but Theresa seemed too tired for pretense. "I do not think it is terrible. Sometimes the truth is just complicated." She looked up at him then, and something passed between them, some recognition of shared loneliness. Nathan felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could not quite name. "You should stay longer," he heard himself say. "Not just for a meal. Stay a few days, rest properly before making that long journey back." Theresa shook her head. "I could not impose on you that way. It would not be an imposition. I have space and you clearly need rest. When did you last sleep in a real bed?" "The hotel in Gold Hill 2 nights ago." "And before that?" She did not answer, which was answer enough. Nathan leaned forward. "Stay, please. You brought me news of Margaret when you could have simply sent a telegram. You traveled thousands of miles to honor a dying woman's request. Let me repay that kindness by giving you a safe place to recover your strength." "People will talk," Theresa said. "A single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch. The nearest neighbor is 10 miles away. No one will know, and I do not care what people think anyway." Nathan realized he was being more insistent than he should be, but he could not seem to stop himself. The thought of this woman disappearing from his life after only a few hours felt wrong somehow, as if fate had brought her here for a reason beyond just delivering sad news. Theresa studied his face for a long moment. "Why does it matter to you whether I stay or go? We are strangers." "I do not know," Nathan admitted. "But you came all this way to keep me from being alone with my grief. It seems wrong to let you leave when you are clearly exhausted and traveling alone." Margaret would want me to look after you." At the mention of Margaret, something in Theresa's expression softened. "3 days," she said finally. "I will stay 3 days to rest, and then I must go." Relief flooded through Nathan, far more than seemed reasonable. 3 days, thank you." He gave Theresa his bedroom and moved his things to the main room, where he would sleep on the floor by the fire. She protested, but he would not hear of it. That first evening, he made dinner while she washed up, and they ate together as the sun set over the mountains in the distance. The conversation came surprisingly easily. Theresa asked him about ranching, and Nathan found himself telling her things he had not spoken about in years. How his brother had died just when the ranch was starting to turn a profit. How hard it had been to keep going alone. How some days the silence felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. "Why do you stay?" Theresa asked. "If it is so lonely, why not sell the ranch and move somewhere with more people?" Nathan considered the question. "This land is part of me now. I have put my blood and sweat into every acre. Leaving would feel like admitting defeat, like saying my brother died for nothing." He paused. "And I suppose I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of failing at something else. At least here I know what I am doing. I am good at raising cattle and fixing fences. I am not sure I would be good at anything else." "I think you underestimate yourself," Theresa said. "Anyone who can build something like this from nothing has more strength than they realize." Her words touched something deep inside him. When was the last time someone had expressed faith in his abilities? Nathan looked across the table at her. This woman who had appeared out of the dust like an answer to a prayer. He had not known he was praying. That night, after Theresa had gone to bed, Nathan lay on his bedroll by the dying fire and thought about how much the cabin had changed with another person in it. The silence was still there, but it felt different now, less oppressive. He could hear Theresa's soft breathing from the other room, and it was the most comforting sound he had heard in years. The next morning, Nathan woke to the smell of coffee brewing. He sat up, disoriented for a moment, and then saw Theresa standing at the stove. She had changed into a simpler dress, brown calico with small flowers, and her hair was braided down her back. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "I woke early and could not get back to sleep." "I do not mind at all," Nathan said, standing and stretching. His back ached from the hard floor, but he did not mention it. "You did not have to make coffee." "I wanted to. It is the least I can do when you have been so generous." They had breakfast together, and then Nathan excused himself to attend to his morning chores. He offered to let Theresa rest, but she insisted on coming with him. He found himself explaining how he managed the ranch, pointing out different cattle, and discussing the challenges of keeping them healthy through the harsh Montana winters. Theresa listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" "No," Nathan admitted. "When I was young, I wanted to be a teacher. I loved books and learning. But my family needed me to work, and then my father died and left debts, and somehow I ended up here instead." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But regret does not change anything, so I try not to think about it too much." He glanced at her. "What about you? What did you want before life took you in other directions?" Theresa was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. "I wanted to be a painter. I loved art, loved creating beauty. But my father said it was impractical, and I needed to focus on finding a husband instead." "And you did find one?" "Yes. A man 20 years older than me who needed someone to keep his house and warm his bed. He never cared about what I wanted or dreamed about. When he drank, which was often, he became cruel." She said all this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "He died falling down the stairs one night when he was drunk. Everyone assumed it was a terrible accident." Nathan heard what she was not saying, but it was not an accident. "He was beating me," Theresa said quietly. I pushed him away and he fell. I did not mean to kill him, but I cannot say I am sorry he is dead." The confession hung in the air between them. Nathan knew he should probably be shocked, should distance himself from this woman who had just admitted to killing her husband. But all he felt was a fierce protective anger toward the man who had hurt her. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Your secret is safe with me." Theresa looked at him with surprise and something like relief. "You are not horrified. I am horrified by what he did to you. Not by what you did to survive." Nathan reached out and gently touched her arm. "You deserve better than what life has given you, Theresa." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "No one has said anything like that to me in a very long time." They stood there in the morning sun, surrounded by grazing cattle and endless sky, and Nathan felt something shift inside him. This woman, this brave and wounded woman, had walked into his life carrying death and sorrow, but somehow she had also brought the possibility of hope. The second day passed much like the first, with Nathan doing his chores and Theresa staying close by. She proved surprisingly useful, helping him repair a section of fence and even assisting when he had to check on a cow that was having trouble with her calf. Theresa did not flinch at the blood or the hard work, and Nathan found himself increasingly impressed by her strength. That evening after dinner, Theresa asked if he had any books. Nathan showed her his small collection, about a dozen volumes that he had accumulated over the years. She chose a book of poetry and read aloud by the firelight while he mended a harness. Her voice was lovely, rising and falling with the rhythm of the words, and Nathan found himself watching her more than working. "What?" she asked, catching his gaze. "I was just thinking how different the cabin feels with you here, more alive somehow." Theresa set down the book. "You really are very lonely, are you not?" "Yes," Nathan admitted. "I did not realize how much until you arrived." "I am lonely too," she said softly. "I have been lonely for most of my life, even when I was surrounded by people. Maybe especially then." "You do not have to be lonely anymore," Nathan said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "You could stay here, not just for 3 days, for longer." Theresa's eyes widened. "Nathan, that is not possible." "Why not?" "Because I am a stranger, because people would talk, because you do not really know me." "I know enough," Nathan said, moving to sit closer to her. "I know you are kind and brave. I know you traveled across the country to honor a promise to a dying woman. I know you have survived things that would have broken most people, and I know that having you here has made me happier than I have been in years." "You are grieving," Theresa said. "You just lost your cousin. You are not thinking clearly." "Maybe," Nathan acknowledged. "Or maybe Margaret sent you here for more than just delivering news. Maybe she knew I needed someone and she trusted you to be that person." Theresa stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "This is too fast. We barely know each other." Nathan stood too, giving her space but not backing down. "Then stay longer than 3 days. Stay a week, a month. Give us time to know each other better, but do not leave just because you think you are supposed to." "And what would I do here? I cannot simply live off your charity. This ranch needs a woman's touch. The house needs proper care. I have been eating bachelor meals for 3 years. You could help me manage things, make this place a real home instead of just somewhere I sleep." He paused. "And maybe you could paint again. I could set up a space for you, get you supplies from town." That last comment made her turn back to him. "You would do that?" "Yes. If it would make you happy, yes." Theresa searched his face, looking for something. "Why? Why do you care about making me happy?" "Because I think I could fall in love with you," Nathan said simply. "Maybe I am already halfway there. I know it is too soon to say such things, but I have spent 3 years being alone and careful and safe, and it has not made me happy. You have been here 2 days, and I feel more alive than I have in years." "You do not love me," Theresa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You love the idea of not being alone." "Maybe at first," Nathan admitted. "But it is more than that now. You are smart and strong and beautiful. You read poetry and you are not afraid of hard work. You have survived terrible things, but you have not let them make you cruel." "How could I not fall for you?" Theresa turned away again, but not before he saw the tears on her cheeks. "I am afraid," she whispered. Nathan moved closer, close enough to touch her shoulder gently. "Of what?" "Of wanting this too much. Of letting myself hope for something good and having it taken away again. Of being hurt. I would never hurt you. You cannot promise that. No one can." "You are right," Nathan said, "but I can promise to try my best not to. I can promise to respect you and value you and give you space to be yourself. I can promise that if you stay, it will be as an equal partner, not as a servant or a possession." Theresa turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "You really mean that? Every word?" She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough skin. "I think I could fall in love with you too. I think maybe I already have started, and that terrifies me." Nathan covered her hand with his own. "Then be terrified with me. We can be scared together." She laughed, a watery sound mixed with tears. "That is perhaps the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I am not good with romantic words, but I am good at keeping my promises." Theresa leaned into him then, and Nathan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She was warm and solid against him, real in a way that made all his lonely years feel like a bad dream fading in the morning light. "I will stay," she said against his chest. "Not forever, not yet, but longer than 3 days. We will see what happens." Relief and joy flooded through Nathan. "Thank you." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other by the firelight, while the wind howled softly outside and the Montana night settled around the cabin like a blanket. The next morning, Nathan rode into Gold Hill to send a telegram and buy supplies. He had asked Theresa what she needed for painting, and she had given him a list with shaking hands, as if she could not quite believe he was serious about supporting her art. He was determined to prove he meant every word he had said. Gold Hill was a small town, barely more than a wide spot in the trail with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, and a few other buildings. Nathan did not come to town often, preferring the solitude of his ranch, but he knew the shopkeeper and a few other locals well enough to nod to. He sent a telegram to his cousin's lawyer in Virginia, informing him of Margaret's death and asking about her estate. Then he went to the general store and began collecting items from Theresa's list: canvas, brushes, paints, turpentine. The shopkeeper, a thin man named Mr. Cooper, raised his eyebrows but did not comment until Nathan asked for help carrying everything out to his wagon. "Taking up painting, Nathan?" Mr. Cooper asked with barely concealed curiosity. "A friend is staying with me. She is an artist." "A friend, you say?" Mr. Cooper's tone made it clear what he thought about a female friend staying at a bachelor's ranch. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. "Yes, a friend. She knew my cousin Margaret back east and came to bring me news of her death." "I am sorry to hear about your cousin," Mr. Cooper said, and he sounded sincere. "Still, you should be careful about your reputation. People talk." "Let them talk," Nathan said, loading the supplies into his wagon. "I have never cared much about what people think, and I am not about to start now." On the way back to the ranch, Nathan thought about Mr. Cooper's warning. It was true that having Theresa stay with him unmarried would cause gossip. But he also knew that most of the ranchers and settlers in this part of Montana were too busy with their own struggles to worry much about anyone else's business. And the ones who did gossip were not people whose opinions he valued anyway. Still, he did not want to cause trouble for Theresa. When he got back to the ranch, he found her hanging laundry outside, her face flushed from the sun. She looked up when she heard the wagon approach, and her expression brightened in a way that made his heart skip. "You got everything?" she asked, hurrying over. "Everything on your list, and a few extra things I thought you might need." He started unloading the supplies, and Theresa made soft sounds of delight as she saw each item. "This must have cost a fortune," she said. "It cost what it cost. Your happiness is worth more to me than money." Theresa looked up at him with such open affection that Nathan almost kissed her right there. But he held back, sensing she needed to move at her own pace. That afternoon, he set up a corner of the barn as a painting studio for her, arranging the space to catch the northern light. Theresa helped, practically glowing with excitement. When it was finished, she stood in the middle of the space and turned in a slow circle. "I never thought I would have something like this again," she said. "My own space to create. It is yours for as long as you want it." She walked over to him and took his hands. "Thank you, Nathan, for all of this, for believing in me." "It is easy to believe in you," he said. This time when she leaned in, he met her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Theresa sighed and wrapped her arms around his neck, Nathan pulled her closer and kissed her with all the longing he had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theresa laughed softly. Well, Nathan agreed. "I suppose this makes things more complicated, or simpler. Depends on how you look at it." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Nathan worked the ranch and Theresa helped where she could, but she also spent hours in her new studio, painting. She started with landscapes, capturing the endless Montana sky and the distant mountains. But gradually, she began painting other things. Nathan working with the cattle, the interior of the cabin, her own hands, scarred and strong. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together and talked about everything and nothing. Nathan learned that Theresa's father had been a minister who preached fire and brimstone, but showed little mercy to his own family. That she had one sister, somewhere in California, whom she had not spoken to in 5 years. That her favorite color was the exact shade of blue the sky turned just before dawn. Theresa learned that Nathan had once broken his arm falling off a horse and had set it himself because the nearest doctor was 2 days away. That he loved thunderstorms because they reminded him of his mother, who had died when he was 10. That he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, convinced he had heard his brother calling his name. They shared their wounds and their hopes, and slowly those conversations knit them together into something stronger than either of them had been alone. One evening in early October, about 6 weeks after Theresa had first arrived, they sat outside watching the sunset. The air had turned crisp with the coming winter, and Nathan had wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders. "I got a response to my telegram," Nathan said. "Margaret left me a small inheritance. Not much, but enough to help expand the ranch next spring." "She would be happy about that," Theresa said. "I have been thinking," Nathan continued, "about what Mr. Cooper said in town about reputation and gossip." Theresa stiffened slightly. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No, God, no, the opposite." Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I am asking you to marry me." Theresa's eyes went wide. "Nathan, I know it is fast. I know people usually court for longer. But this is not the East, and we are not conventional people. We have been living together, learning each other for 6 weeks now. I know I love you. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I know that every day you are here makes me happier than I thought possible." "I love you too," Theresa said, and tears were running down her face now. "But marriage is such a big step. My last marriage was a nightmare." "I am not him," Nathan said firmly. I would never hurt you or control you or try to make you into something you are not. This would be a partnership, Theresa. A real one. You would have just as much say in how we run this ranch as I do. You really mean that? I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Theresa was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the darkening sky. Nathan waited, his heart hammering in his chest. Finally, she turned back to him. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Joy exploded through Nathan like fireworks. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring every ounce of love and relief and happiness into it. When they broke apart, both of them were laughing. When? Theresa asked. As soon as possible, tomorrow if we can arrange it. Tomorrow, she laughed. That is very soon. I have waited 3 years for someone like you. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary. So the next day, they rode into Gold Hill together and found the circuit judge who happened to be passing through. They were married in a simple ceremony with Mr. Cooper and his wife as witnesses. Theresa wore her best dress, the dark blue one she had arrived in, and Nathan had trimmed his hair and shaved. He had also bought a ring from the general store, a simple gold band that fit Theresa's finger perfectly. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed his new bride with such enthusiasm that Mr. Cooper cleared his throat awkwardly. But Nathan did not care. For the first time in 3 years, he felt completely, entirely happy. They celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury Nathan could barely afford but insisted on anyway. Theresa kept looking at her ring, touching it gently as if she could not quite believe it was real. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked. "That I came here to say goodbye to my old life, and somehow I ended up with a completely new one instead. Are you happy about that?" "Yes," Theresa said, meeting his eyes. "Happier than I have ever been." That night they shared a bed as husband and wife for the first time. Nathan was gentle and patient, aware of Theresa's past trauma. But she responded to his touch with an eagerness that told him she had left her fear behind. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, while the wind whispered outside. "I love you, Theresa Ashford," Nathan said, trying out her new name. "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for asking me to stay. Thank you for saying yes." The winter came hard and fast that year, with snow starting in November and not letting up until March. But Nathan and Theresa barely noticed. They were too busy building their life together. Nathan taught Theresa how to handle cattle and mend fences. Theresa taught Nathan how to really cook, not just throw meat in a pan and hope for the best. They read books aloud by the fire, played cards, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Theresa painted constantly, creating a body of work that astonished Nathan with its beauty and depth. She painted the ranch in winter, all stark white and shadow. She painted Nathan's hands, weathered and strong. She painted her own face reflected in a mirror, looking more peaceful than she had ever looked before. In February, a blizzard trapped them inside for a week. They kept the fire going constantly and rationed their food carefully. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like a gift. A week with nothing to do but be together, no chores pulling them apart. They made love and told stories and dreamed about the future. "I want children someday," Theresa said one night, lying with her head on Nathan's chest. "I did not think I did, but now I do." "How many?" Nathan asked, stroking her hair. "I do not know. 2, maybe 3, enough to fill this house with noise and laughter." "I would like that," Nathan said, "though we might need to add on to the cabin first." "We could build a real house," Theresa said dreamily, "with multiple bedrooms and a big kitchen and a porch that wraps around the whole thing." "We could," Nathan agreed. "It would take time and money, but we could do it." When spring finally arrived, it felt like the whole world was waking up. The snow melted, revealing the brown grass underneath that would soon turn green. Nathan's cattle had survived the winter well, and he was able to sell several head at good prices. With that money and Margaret's inheritance, he bought more land and expanded his herd. Theresa turned the garden behind the cabin into a showplace, planting vegetables and flowers with equal care. She also started selling her paintings in Gold Hill, and to both their surprise, they sold quickly. People were drawn to her honest, beautiful depictions of Montana life. In June, Theresa discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after dinner, her hands shaking slightly as she took his. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "Our baby." Nathan let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. He did, then knelt in front of her and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Theresa ran her fingers through his hair, her expression tender. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I hope so. I hope I can give our child everything I never had." "You will. We both will." The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa was sick for the first few months and Nathan worried constantly. But Dr. Wilson, who had recently moved to Gold Hill, assured them that everything was normal. By autumn, Theresa's belly had swelled noticeably, and she had to stop helping with the heavier ranch work. She chafed at the restriction, but Nathan was firm. "I am not risking you or the baby. You can still paint and tend the garden, but no more hauling feed or fixing fences. You are being overprotective." "I am being sensible. Let me take care of you, please." Theresa sighed but agreed. In truth, she was more tired than she wanted to admit. Growing a person took more energy than she had anticipated. In January, when the snow was deep and the nights were long, Theresa went into labor. Nathan rode hard to Gold Hill to fetch Dr. Wilson, his heart in his throat the entire way. The doctor came back with him, and Nathan paced outside the bedroom while Theresa labored inside. It took 14 hours, the longest 14 hours of Nathan's life. He heard Theresa cry out in pain, heard the doctor giving calm instructions, and felt utterly helpless. Finally, just as the sun was rising, he heard a baby cry. Dr. Wilson opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Nathan, a healthy baby boy." Nathan rushed past him into the bedroom. Theresa lay propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at Nathan with tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son," she said. Nathan approached slowly, almost afraid. Theresa pulled back the blanket to reveal a small red face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a wail. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "He is," Theresa agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Nathan knew immediately. "Thomas." "After my brother." "Thomas Ashford," Theresa said, trying it out. "I like it. Tommy for short." Nathan reached out and gently touched his son's cheek. Tommy stopped crying and turned his head toward the touch, his tiny mouth searching. Nathan felt something crack open inside his chest, a well of love so deep he thought he might drown in it. "I will protect you," he promised his son. "I will give you a good life. I will make sure you always know you are loved." "We both will," Theresa said, taking Nathan's hand. They sat like that as the sun rose over the Montana mountains, a new family beginning their journey together. The first year of Tommy's life was exhausting and joyful in equal measure. He was a good baby, generally happy unless he was hungry or needed changing. Nathan discovered he was surprisingly good at being a father, patient and gentle with his tiny son. He would walk Tommy around the cabin at night when he was fussy, singing old songs his own mother had sung to him, Theresa painted less, but did not seem to mind. She was absorbed in their son, marveling at every small change and development. When Tommy smiled for the first time, she cried with joy. When he started reaching for objects, she made sure to give him interesting things to explore. As Tommy grew into a toddler, the ranch prospered. Nathan's herd had grown to almost 400 head, and he had hired 2 hands to help with the work. The money from Theresa's paintings had paid for lumber, and together, they had added 2 new rooms to the cabin, including a proper bedroom for Tommy. On their second wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Theresa by taking her back to Gold Hill for dinner at the hotel. Tommy stayed with one of the ranch hands, a young man named Peter who was surprisingly good with children. Over dinner, Theresa reached across the table and took Nathan's hand. "Do you remember when we first met? When I drove up to the ranch to tell you about Margaret? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and also that you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." "I was," Theresa said. "I came here expecting to deliver bad news and then disappear back into my lonely life. I never imagined I would end up staying. I am glad you did. I am glad I had the courage to ask you. I am glad I had the courage to say yes." She paused. "I want another baby, Nathan. I know Tommy is still young, but I want to grow our family." Nathan grinned. "I was hoping you would say that. I want our children to have siblings, to not be alone the way I was." So they started trying for another baby, and in the spring, Theresa became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, with less sickness and more energy. Tommy was 2 years old now, running around the ranch and getting into everything. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and he was fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified his parents. In November, Theresa gave birth to a daughter. They named her Margaret after Nathan's cousin, with the nickname Maggie. She was smaller than Tommy had been, with a cap of light brown hair and a serious expression that made her seem wise beyond her infant years. Nathan fell in love all over again. Holding Maggie in his arms, watching Tommy toddle over to stare at his baby sister with wonder, Nathan felt a contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was everything he had ever wanted and more than he had dared to hope for. The years passed in a blur of hard work and family joy. Tommy grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who followed Nathan everywhere, desperate to help with ranch work. Maggie was quieter but just as determined, with a creative streak she had inherited from her mother. She loved watching Theresa paint and would spend hours making her own pictures with whatever materials she could find. When Tommy was 7 and Maggie was 5, Theresa discovered she was pregnant again. This baby was a surprise, and Theresa was 31 now, old enough that the pregnancy felt riskier. But everything went smoothly, and in the summer, they welcomed another son whom they named James. James was a happy, easy baby who rarely fussed and seemed content to watch his older siblings play. Tommy and Maggie adored him, fighting over who got to hold him and help feed him. The cabin, which had seemed so empty when Nathan lived there alone, was now bursting with life and noise and love. Nathan's ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. He employed 6 men full-time now, and his herd had grown to over 800 cattle. He had also bought the neighboring property when the owner retired, doubling his land holdings. It was more success than he had ever dreamed of, but Nathan never forgot where he had started or how close he had come to giving up. One evening, when James was a year old, Nathan and Theresa sat on the porch they had finally built, watching the sunset while their children played in the yard. Tommy was teaching Maggie how to use a lasso, and James was sitting in the dirt, happily making mud pies. "You ever miss your old life?" Nathan asked. The one you had before you came here. Never, Theresa said without hesitation. That life was full of fear and loneliness. This life is full of love and purpose. There is no comparison. I am glad, Nathan said, because I cannot imagine my life without you. You were so persistent when we first met, Theresa said with a smile, asking me to stay when I was determined to leave. What made you so sure I was worth fighting for? Nathan thought about it. I was not sure, not at first. But then I realized that you had come all that way just to keep a promise to a dying woman. That kind of integrity and kindness is rare. And when I looked at you, I saw someone who had survived terrible things but had not let them destroy the good parts of herself. I wanted to protect that goodness, to give it a safe place to grow. You did that, Theresa said softly. You gave me a home and a family and a chance to become who I was always meant to be. You saved me, Nathan. We saved each other, Nathan corrected. I was drowning in loneliness before you arrived. You gave me a reason to keep going, to build something bigger than just survival. Theresa leaned her head on his shoulder. Margaret would be so happy if she could see us now. She always believed you deserved good things. I think she sent you to me on purpose, Nathan said. I think she knew we needed each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and the setting sun. Tommy had managed to lasso a fence post and was whooping with triumph. Maggie was clapping and James was bouncing up and down in excitement, even though he had no idea what was happening. We should probably get them inside for dinner, Theresa said. 5 more minutes, Nathan said. I want to remember this moment just like this, our children happy and healthy, the ranch thriving, you beside me. This is everything I ever wanted. 5 more minutes, Theresa agreed. As the years continued to pass, Nathan and Theresa's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, times when ranch decisions had to be made or children needed discipline, and they did not quite agree on the best approach. But they had learned to talk through their differences, to listen to each other and compromise. Tommy grew into a responsible young man who loved ranch work and showed every sign of being an excellent rancher himself someday. Maggie discovered she had real artistic talent, even better than her mother's, and began selling her paintings when she was just 14. James was the charmer of the family, quick with a joke and able to make friends with anyone. When Tommy was 18, he started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Sarah who loved the land as much as he did. Nathan and Theresa watched their eldest son fall in love, and it reminded them of their own journey together. We were younger than him when we got married, Theresa remarked one evening after Tommy had ridden off to visit Sarah. We were, Nathan agreed, and everyone probably thought we were crazy. Were we crazy? Maybe a little, but it worked out, did it not? Better than I ever imagined possible, Theresa said, kissing him softly. Tommy and Sarah were married the following spring, and they built a house on the far edge of Nathan's land. A year later, they had a son of their own, making Nathan and Theresa grandparents. Holding his grandson for the first time, Nathan felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. Maggie moved to Denver when she was 20 to study art formally, though she came home often. She eventually married a newspaperman who appreciated her talent and supported her career. They settled in Denver but visited Montana every summer, bringing their children to run wild on the ranch just as their mother had done. James took longer to find his path. He tried ranching but discovered it was not his passion. He tried working in Gold Hill but found small-town life stifling. Finally, at 22, he announced he wanted to go to university to study law. Nathan and Theresa supported his decision, even though it meant James moving far away. We raised them to follow their dreams, Nathan said to Theresa after James had left for school. We cannot be sad when they do exactly that. I know, Theresa said, but the house feels so quiet now. It was true. After years of noise and chaos, the cabin was peaceful again. But it was a different kind of peace than the lonely silence Nathan had endured before Theresa arrived. This was the peace of a life well lived, of children raised and launched into the world, of a love that had weathered decades and grown stronger with each passing year. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Theresa back to the spot where she had first driven up in her wagon all those years ago. The ranch had changed dramatically since then. The cabin had been expanded into a proper house. There were multiple barns and outbuildings. Fences stretched in all directions, marking off pastures full of cattle. "You remember that day?" Nathan asked. "Of course," Theresa said. "I was so nervous. I had traveled so far, and I did not know what kind of man you would be. For all I knew, you could have been cruel or angry that I had come." "I was heartbroken about Margaret," Nathan said. "But the moment I saw you, I felt something shift, like maybe there was still good in the world after all." "I wanted to leave so badly," Theresa admitted. "I was terrified of staying, of letting myself hope for anything good. But you asked me to stay with such sincerity, such genuine loneliness, that I could not say no." "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, "asking you to stay. Best decision I ever made saying yes." Nathan pulled a small box from his pocket. "I got you something." Theresa opened it to find a locket on a delicate gold chain. Inside were tiny photographs of their 3 children and 2 of their grandchildren with room for more. "Nathan," she breathed, "it is beautiful. I wanted you to have something to carry our family with you always, though I suppose you do that anyway in your heart." Theresa fastened the locket around her neck, tears streaming down her face. 25 years, she said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever." "Here is to 25 more," Nathan said, pulling her close. "And 25 after that," Theresa added. They did not get 50 more years together, though they both wished they could have. When Nathan was 68 and Theresa was 63, Nathan suffered a heart attack while working cattle. He collapsed in the field, and by the time Tommy found him and got him back to the house, it was clear he did not have long. Dr. Wilson came from town, but there was nothing he could do except make Nathan comfortable. The family gathered around his bed, Tommy and Sarah with their 3 children, Maggie and her husband with their 2, and James, who had rushed home from his law practice as soon as he got the telegram. But Nathan asked for a moment alone with Theresa first. The children left reluctantly, and Theresa climbed into bed beside her husband, carefully avoiding the places where he hurt. "This is not how I wanted this to go," Nathan said, his voice weak. "I wanted decades more with you." "I know," Theresa said, crying. "I am not ready to say goodbye, I am not either, but I need you to know something." Nathan took her hand, his grip still surprisingly strong. "The day you drove up to this ranch was the day my life truly began. Everything before that was just existing, just getting through each day. But you gave me love and family and joy. You gave me a reason to build something beautiful. I could not have asked for a better partner or a better life." "You gave me all those things too," Theresa said. "You saved me from a life of fear and loneliness. You let me become who I was always meant to be. You loved me so completely that I learned how to love myself." "Promise me you will keep painting," Nathan said. "Keep creating beauty, and tell our grandchildren stories about me so they remember." "Every day," Theresa promised. "I will tell them about the lonely rancher who asked me to stay, who gave me a home and a family and more love than I knew existed in the world." Nathan smiled. "Not so lonely once you stayed. Never lonely again," Theresa agreed. They lay like that, holding each other until Nathan's breathing changed and Theresa knew the end was coming. She called the children in, and they all gathered around, saying their goodbyes and telling Nathan how much they loved him. He tried to respond, but the words would not come anymore. His eyes moved from face to face, and Theresa could see the love and pride there even if he could not speak. When he finally slipped away, it was peacefully, surrounded by the family he had built. Theresa held him until his hand grew cold, and even then, she did not want to let go. They buried Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains he had loved. The funeral was well attended, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around to pay their respects. Everyone spoke of Nathan's honesty, his hard work, and his devotion to his family. After everyone had left, Theresa stood alone at the grave. Tommy had tried to stay with her, but she had sent him away gently. She needed this moment with her husband, just the two of them one last time. "I came here to say goodbye once before," she said to the grave. "To say goodbye to my old life and deliver news of death. But you turned that goodbye into a hello instead. You gave me decades of happiness when I expected nothing but loneliness. I do not know how to thank you for that gift." The wind whispered through the grass, and Theresa imagined it was Nathan's voice, telling her she did not need to thank him, that loving her had been its own reward. "I will miss you every day," she continued, "but I will not waste the time I have left. I will paint and spend time with our children and grandchildren. I will live the beautiful life you helped me build. That is how I will honor your memory." Theresa returned to the ranch house, where Tommy and Sarah were waiting. They tried to convince her to move in with them, but Theresa refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "Your father and I built it together, and I am not leaving it." So she stayed in the house, surrounded by memories. She painted more than ever, creating a series of works depicting her life with Nathan, their first meeting, their wedding day, teaching Tommy to ride, Maggie's first art show, James graduating from university, all the small and large moments that had made up their life together. The paintings were some of her best work, raw with emotion and love. When Maggie arranged for them to be shown in a Denver gallery, they sold out within days. People were moved by the honest, tender depiction of a long love story. Theresa lived another 12 years after Nathan's death. She never remarried, never even considered it. Nathan had been the love of her life, the person who had saved her and stood beside her for 25 years. No one else could ever measure up to that. She saw all her grandchildren grow up and even met several great-grandchildren. She taught Maggie's daughter to paint and told James's son stories about the ranch in the old days. She maintained the house carefully, making sure everything was just as she and Nathan had left it. When Theresa finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, her children buried her next to Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch. They placed a single headstone for both of them that read, "Nathan and Theresa Ashford." Two lonely souls who found each other and built a family, together forever. Tommy took over the main ranch, expanding it even further while respecting the land his father had loved. Maggie's paintings hung in galleries across the West, and James became a respected judge. All of them passed down the story of how their parents had met, how a woman had come to say goodbye and instead found a new beginning. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each one adding their own touches, but never forgetting the foundation Nathan and Theresa had laid. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the grass, people swore they could see two figures standing on the hill, looking out over the land they had built together, still in love after all these years. The story of Nathan and Theresa became a legend in that part of Montana. People spoke of the lonely rancher who had been brave enough to ask a stranger to stay, and the woman who had been brave enough to say yes. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come when we are willing to take risks, to open our hearts even when we are afraid, to believe in the possibility of happiness even when the world has given us every reason to doubt. And so their love story lived on, passed down from generation to generation, a testament to the power of courage, kindness, and the simple act of asking someone to stay instead of letting them go. A reminder that goodbye can sometimes become hello, that endings can become beginnings, and that true love, when it finally finds you, is worth every moment of the wait.